Previously, we asked you if this Magic the Gathering interaction is legal. We have Minthara, Teleportation Circle, and Grizzly Bears out on the battlefield, and no permanents have left the battlefield this turn so far. So we move to our end step and stack our triggers so that Minthara triggers first and then Teleportation Circle triggers on top. We resolve the Teleportation Circle where we flicker the Grizzly Bears to exile and then back to the battlefield, and resolve Minthara's trigger to give us an experience counter. The answer here may actually surprise you, but these two cards do not work together in the way that you would think. So let's dig into it. To understand the interaction, we're going to start at the basics, all right? What are the relevant abilities on both Minthara and Teleportation Circle? Examining the text on both cards, they use the terms at, so at the beginning of your end step. From previous videos, we know that abilities that start with when, whenever, or at are triggered abilities, and these abilities trigger as trigger conditions or trigger states occur based on what's listed on the card. So similar to Solemn Simulacrum entering the battlefield, it says when Solemn Simulacrum enters the battlefield, blah, blah, blah. Typically, when the trigger condition is met, the trigger goes on the stack, and then you resolve the trigger. However, not all triggered abilities are the same. It's absolutely true that Teleportation Circle will trigger at the beginning of your end step, but if a permanent hasn't left the battlefield before your end step, Minthara simply does not trigger, regardless of what Teleportation Circle is doing. This is because Minthara uses what is known as an intervening if clause in her templating for her triggered ability. So let's take a look at what the rules say this technically is. So CR 603.4 states, a triggered ability may read, quote, when, whenever, at, trigger event, if condition, effect. So when the trigger event occurs, the ability checks whether the stated condition is true. The ability triggers only if it is. Otherwise, it does nothing. So what this effectively means is that the condition following the word if has to be true at the time the trigger is required to go on the stack. If the condition following it is not true, the trigger never happens at all. So in the case of Minthara, it says at the beginning of your end step. That is when the trigger has to happen. So if a permanent hasn't left the battlefield under your control at the beginning of your end step, the trigger just never happens for Minthara at all. Now, this is not dissimilar to a card like Ocelot Pride. Now, Ocelot Pride says at the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, create a 1/1 cat creature token. Because Ocelot Pride has the intervening if you gain life this turn, you create a 1/1 cat creature token. But if you've not gained life, none of the Ocelot Pride's abilities will trigger. None of it goes on the stack at all. Doesn't matter if you have the City's Blessing, doesn't matter, none of that. It just never happens. So Minthara and Teleportation Circle do not interact together, and Minthara doesn't interact with Conjurer's Closet either, which does effectively the same thing. I don't blame you if you didn't know this. There's no way to know this without looking into the rules. That one little word, if, is just tucked in there, right? It's just... What do you think? Did we miss anything? There might be some nuance we sort of just glossed over. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And if there's any fuzzy interactions or things that don't really make sense to you, let us know in the comments. I want to tackle these things. I'm learning, you're learning, we're all learning. Thank you guys for being here. And we hope to see you on the next episode of Do You Know the Rules?